All right. I think we're about to get started. So I'll just say hello again to everyone who's joining us this morning. My name is Anaïs. I am head of online community at Codebase. Codebase is here to support startups and scale-ups with workspace, events, education, and community across the UK and beyond. Today, we're delighted to welcome Anna from HubSpot for Startups, who's one of our close partners, and that is going to share guidance on investment and fundraising. We know it's quite a hot topic in our community as well. So we hope this will be helpful to everyone. I'll pass it over to Anna in a minute. And just a quick reminder again of our code of conduct that I put in the chat. And we are using Zoom webinars. This will be recorded, and everyone who's registered on Eventbrite will receive the link by the end of the month next week. We will get going as well with a presentation, and there will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end. We'll be mainly using the Q&A function in the Zoom. So if you just hover at the bottom of your screen on desktop, you can find the Q&A button. You can submit your question there, and we'll also be chatting in the chat if there's anything. All right, thank you very much. Anna, I'll pass it over to you. Thanks again for joining us this morning, and over to you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Anaïs, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for joining. So I'm dialing in from Dublin in Ireland. So yeah, again, thanks for joining, and welcome to the session on using tools to supercharge your fundraising process. So I'll just get through here. So just to introduce myself a bit, I'm Anna. I'm head of HubSpot for Startups for UK and Ireland. And in that role, I really help to accelerate sales, marketing, and services for startups. So I partner with top VCs, accelerators, and incubators across the UK and Ireland. One of them, of course, is Codebase. So we've done a few webinars with them over the years. So excited to come back and do this one. And my goal is really to help startups grow better with the right kind of knowledge, tools, and connections needed to scale. So just to tell you a little bit about HubSpot for Startups before we get started then, a little bit more detail. So we offer educational resources and tailored training. So we have tons of startup-friendly content and resources. We also run quite a lot of webinars and events. And for our top partners, such as Codebase, we'd run these kind of customized webinars based on, as Anaïs said, what's kind of hot topics in the community at that time. So we're going with fundraising this time. We did a sales webinar back in, I think, November, December. So you can also watch that back. We also have an integrated platform for entrepreneurs with access to over 1,000 integrations now. And we have professional software at kind of startup pricing. So if you're part of the Codebase community, you could be eligible for between 30 to 90% off HubSpot, or if you're part of one of our other approved partners, you can get that discount on HubSpot as well. So just to go into today's agenda, so quite a lot to cover. We're going to go into really all of it comes down to managing your fundraising process, kind of tips on how to do that, and then also how to use technology to really make yourself efficient in managing that process. So what I'll kind of be coming back to again and again is that a lot of people don't really think of a fundraising process as a sales and marketing process, but I'm going to break it down in a way that it is. And it really is something that, you know, like a sales or marketing process, it's something that you need to manage. So to break that down, we're going to begin to some source of capital. And I'd be remiss not to give a little bit of tips on kind of fundraising during a difficult time, as of course there's been a lot of economic, social turmoil over the last year, a couple of years. We're going to that kind of that find stage, so finding investors and researching the investor landscape, going into managing your investor pipeline and that kind of outreach process with investors. I will be putting things into practice a bit, so that's kind of the tools part of this session. So using a tool like HubSpot to really manage that process and make yourself more efficient. And then I'll have a few additional resources, and then we'll jump into Q&A. The content should take about 40 minutes or so, so we will leave lots of time for Q&A. So please do feel free to use the Q&A function, but we will kind of I'll be addressing any of those at the end. And you can also reach out to me after the session as well. So just kind of set the scene a bit, fundraising really can be a full-time job. When you're actively fundraising, can feel like that's the only thing you're doing all day, every day. And you're still building a company. You're spending all this time doing the sales, doing the marketing, and you're still doing all that at the same time as well. you might be thinking, you've kind of, when you've been fundraising, it can feel like that's the only thing you work on all day, every day. You might be thinking, how do you get back on the right track? How do you kind of I always say zoom out of the situation. How do you zoom out and really think how you're going to manage this in the most efficient way, and also how to target the right investors? So first of all, just to go into a few kind of sources of capital. Some of this might be obvious to some of you. I know we'd have people maybe who are at different stages in their fundraising process. Some of you might have already raised rounds. Some of you are embarking on your fundraising journey for the first time. We'll just set out that there are lots of different options. VC funding isn't for everyone. Angel investors aren't for everyone, or you might be, bootstrapping in the early days. We'll just go into some of those sources of capital. Oh, thank you. There's a poll there. Thanks, Anaïs. So can be crowdfunding platforms. So platforms that bring together individuals for investments. So some of the biggest examples of this in the UK are Seedrs, Crowdcube, kind of Shadow Founder, Spark Crowdfunding as well in Ireland. There's lots of government funding programs. So in Ireland, it's really Enterprise Ireland. But in the UK, I know that Innovate UK do a lot of grant support. As I said, you can go there's bootstrapping or friends and family funding, loads of different angel investor funds. So, individuals who provide capital to startups, again, an obvious one, usually in exchange for convertible debt or ownership equity. There are individual ones who could invest in your specific sector, but there are also collaborative networks. It's just cut off slightly there, but another partner I work with closely is Angel Investment Network. They have aggregate amounts of multiple investors on their platform. Venture capital firms, firms who raise private funds to invest in early stage or later stage company, again, in exchange for equity or an ownership stake. So examples could be Seed Camp, Frontline Ventures, etc. And then the kind of venture debt and loan side as well. So lots going on there. I should say as well, before I've been in HubSpot for 3 years, so I've got that experience as well. But before HubSpot, I worked at Enterprise Ireland, which is the VC arm of the Irish government. So I did have experience on that fundraising process and, doing lots of co-funding into innovative startups that we worked with, just to note that as well. In terms of the current climate as it is now, this is more of a rhetorical question, but during an economic downturn, I'm just gonna, the poll there was coming up. Just delete the poll, sorry. During an economic downturn, is the impact on funding opportunities the same for angel seed investors and later stage VCs? Oh, no, angel and seed investors are impacted less than VCs. So the number of deals that angels and seed investors made during the 2008 recession remained consistent. And why is that? That's because this is generally, and can be very general, can really depend again on the sector, lots of different factors. But generally, angels and seed investors have much riskier profiles, whereas maybe some of those later stage VCs can be more risk adverse. And during times of economic hardship, we'll maybe be doing more, bridging rounds for existing startups, etc., or trying to raise additional funds themselves. As a result, the following might occur. Startups can be forced to give out more equity during rounds. Rounds might become smaller than historical averages. Valuations for a company can become smaller. I know we had some really different fluctuations in valuations over the last couple of years. There's a lot of unicorns who are founded with billion-dollar valuations, might not be unicorns anymore. So startups really need to prove themselves even more to get funding. So as I said, I'd be remiss not to mention this in a session about fundraising, just in terms of some of these difficulties in the current climate, but also a lot of hope as well, because a lot of companies, it's said a lot, but a lot of companies were born during downturns. So lots of opportunities as well. So just a couple of tips on fundraising during a difficult time before I jump into some of that fundraising process side. So sounds a bit cheesy, but don't let this challenging time impact the mood of your pitch. So if you're, pitching to a new investor, or in like your language, in your outreach to prospective investors or conversations with current ones, like you want to keep it real, but also if it's a net new investor, you're asking people to invest in like, your product, your idea, and or your mission. So you want to try to still show that enthusiasm for your startup, regardless of the economy. So when I talk about staying grounded, so in kind of a more kind of an economic downturn, stress levels can be high all around. People can be doing layoffs, there might be cost-cutting measures. They're really recognizing this and showing appreciation for your investors' time. When we talk about remaining confident, so regardless of the economy, pitching confidently why your startup deserves a chance to grow. And optimistic. So an investor isn't going to want to bet on you if you're not already betting on yourself. So trying to keep it positive throughout that pitch as well. I always talk about pitch decks being more like, there's certain information, of course, you can keep the same if your team is staying the same. If certain parts of your product are staying the same, but a lot of that information is going to be evolving over time. So it shouldn't be like a static pitch deck. It should be something that you're always going back to. And particularly the pitch deck you have now, if maybe you were fundraising at the start of last year, that's probably going to look a lot different. So with investors, particularly over the last year, tightening their investment criteria, you want to ensure your pitch deck includes these things. So first of all, a realistic contingency plan to show you can adapt in the face of economic uncertainty. Aggressive financial targets, so illustrating how you can maintain cash flow. We would say cash is king, but really showing how you can maintain it over time, what is the forecast of cash flow. Strong KPIs, so show you can drive sustainable profitability instead of kind of that excessive growth. And really focus on driving profitability is what investors are often really looking for. So things like how you're going to reduce costs, increase turnover, or increase overall productivity and efficiency. So this could be things like quicker launch times for products, or launching into new markets as well. So really, like, this isn't a one size fits all, but just making sure that your pitch deck is up to date, and it's not something from that you maybe worked on in a workshop about a year and a half ago, and it's kind of gone out of date. Don't slow down. So a lot of like investors, VCs have planned ahead for economic hardship, and these VCs are still scouting for top startups. The best way to kind of think about recession proofing your fundraising, if again this is the route you're going down, is to keep pitching, keep going, and get out there and talking to those investors. And then another one to maintain that efficiency is really nailing your fundraising process to remain as efficient as possible, which is what I'll be going into in a minute. So as I said, if we're talking about the fundraising process as a kind of sales and marketing process, the first is that kind of, if you think about someone looking for, say, a HubSpot sales rep looking for new leads, that first stage is that sourcing stage, and that rep dedicates time to focus on that sourcing stage. So this is what the finding good fit investors is. So I'll go into some of these things in terms of how you could think about, finding those investors and what criteria you want to look at, but there's no, one size fits all. It'll depend on what suits you and your business. So if you want to look at the investment criteria, if you start making gathering insights, so when you're researching investors, so it could be you want to look at what's their average investment size. Again, that could have changed over the last 6 to 12 months. So making sure you're looking at like the most up-to-date data as well. If you're a B2C company, but you recognize they only invest in B2B, that won't be the best fit. So seeing what kind of historical investments they've done on that side, what funding stage they tend to invest in. So if you're, a pre-seed or a seed company, but they only invest in Series A, that's not going to be the best fit. What kind of engagement they have with startups, that kind of ties into the next point I'm going to make in terms of what else they can do for you. What vertical are they in? So there is quite a lot of, sector agnostic investors. But if they invest in a specific vertical like climate tech and you're in that area, of course, that's going to be one that is going to be top on your list. Important one as well, are they actively investing? So, VCs would raise They could be on their third fund or their fourth fund. So if they've raised a fund 3 months ago, they're still going to have a lot of investments to make out of that fund. Whereas if you've heard from someone they're actively fundraising, then they won't have as much kind of funds to actually give to you. So just thinking of that and thinking of the timing around that as well. Are you comfortable with their historical proposed terms or valuation? This is something you can ask around about. And then kind of that value add piece as well. Like, are they that kind of spray and pray model, as they say sometimes in the investor world, or are they going to do that kind of value add for you? Are there other people, that they can introduce you to? How are they going to help? Like, are they just there to write the check, or are there other value adds they can help you with beyond that capital deployment? How strong is their network? So are they going to be able to help, introduce you to potential buyers or help you get other investors? These are all like considerations you should look at when going through this with your team and picking the best investors that you're sourcing. So the next step of this in terms of if you're finding those investors is kind of building investor lists then that you can then start to prioritize and go after. So again, it's that sourcing, that research, that kind of part of the fundraising process. So a couple of ways you can start to do this as well is you can look at, there are a couple of options. You could look for a paid investor list. So this is more, private organizations that aggregate investor data and sell access to investor lists. So the pro of this, they, can be very comprehensive, more often up to date, can be filterable on different investment preferences. So you can, filter, as I said, by all those different funding stages, sectors. You can get all that historical data pretty quickly. But the con is, of course, as a startup, these can be expensive. Some examples here are like Crunchbase and PitchBook. So it is something to look into. I do know, say with Crunchbase, we use that a bit on my team, and there is some cheap enough. If you get Crunchbase Pro, I think you get options for €30 a month, I think, around that. But again, there's a lot of free data out there. So I'd say more going towards the free investor lists. And so there are also local ecosystem players aggregating VC information for startups. You just need to know where to look. So say in Ireland, we have Tech Ireland, Start in Ireland. Seed Legals, who I also work with, have a great investor directory. You can check out news articles. I'm sure that Anaïs and Codebase, you have a whole community of support with Codebase and TechScaler, especially with that local Scottish ecosystem. I know that TechStart is a great VC there as well. So talking to those community players who can really help you prioritize what investors to go after, and also help to make those kind of warm introductions to investors through one-to-one email introductions or investor events and things like that as well. And then one I've just added to this list as well since I last delivered this presentation is using AI. So of course, if you can use ChatGPT to literally say, again, there's always that quality issue and making sure the information is up to date. But you can use ChatGPT to say, find me, it's all about the prompts with it. So you could say, find top seed investors in Scotland that do this. So again, using AI to really be efficient in your process there. And one more thing as well, if anyone has any resources where they've found investors or particularly helpful lists or recommendations, I'd love you all to learn from each other as well. So if you want to pop any of those in the chat, feel free to do so. So when we go into then, so you've done that kind of sourcing stage, identifying, you found a bunch of investors you want to go out after, and maybe you've also prioritized those lists. So if you found, say, 50 investors, you're not going to go, it's like the same as you're not going to go after 50 top prospective customers all at the same time. You want to prioritize those as well. Maybe you have a top 10 list, which is your A list, And then below that, you have your B and your C list. So prioritizing that as well. But yeah, we go into the guts of this in terms of managing that pipeline then when you have that list to go after. So as I said before, a common mistake I can see is startups not treating the investor fundraising process as that sales process. So here are a couple like high-level steps that you can use to really kind of show that that is a sales process. And it's really important to keep track of all these different investor contacts that you're reaching out to, because even if they're not a good fit now, they could be in the future. So this is very similar again to sales prospecting. So I'll kind of go through this here and I'll show you it live in terms of what it could look like in a tool like HubSpot as well. So these are, again, these stages could be different. These are just ones that I've kind of recommended here. This can be more like, it also depends on the investor. This is more for like if it was a VC investor persona. But of course, the process could look different. Look very different for friends and family. It could look different for crowdfunding, etc. So this is just to preface this is more of a kind of VC persona. So first step, I have put qualified investor here. Similar to sales, like the 3 top rules in sales are, qualify, 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 which is the same for investors. I'd say that's one of the most important stages. And similar to sales, you want to know, you should really be thinking about whether your prospect or your investor in this case has interest. So if they have interest in your product or service, do they have the authority? So are they maybe an associate, or they're screening your startup, but they might not have the authority down the line to make the decision? And do they have budget? So that goes back to the point I was making before on do they actually have funds to invest in you in the next 6 to 12 months? So as I said, similar to sales, this is similar to sales and marketing process. Think of it in that sense in terms of really qualifying early on. Then moving to the pitch meeting, the due diligence stage, that can have a lot of back and forth. Legal, again, this can take longer depending on if there are other investors involved, what the terms are, getting that term sheet together, etc. And then we've got cash in bank, closed won or closed lost. So as I said before, managing this and even knowing those closed lost deals, because say if there is a closed lost potential investment this year that maybe you weren't ready for that VC, or they didn't have funds this year, but you could come back to them next year. So similar to as in sales, it's important to revisit those kind of closed lost deals. So yeah, they said prioritize, qualify early, and really kind of managing this in this actual like a process, like a sales process. And I'll show you this live in the tool in a minute as well. So when you think of keeping track of that investor pipeline, as I'll show you in a few minutes, you can use a CRM to get all that investor information in one place. So if you have got that list, you can upload that to a CRM. It doesn't have to be HubSpot, but just a tool to manage that in one place. And then you can easily, segment by region and investment criteria by creating lists. You can use a CRM to do outreach at scale. So you can think of managing those kind of communications with investors, using things like templates and sequences, and then track next steps with investors, so things like tasks. And then that pipeline management, which is what I just showed you in terms of those kind of fundraising steps. So really manage your investor pipeline in terms of, in that deal pipeline, track your progress with reports, and visualize everything quickly with dashboards. Another point to make as well is the importance of communications with investors and how you manage that. So similar to how, if you're an earlier stage company, it's going to be easy to manage communications with like 5 early stage prospects. In a similar way, it's going to be easy enough if you're starting out and you maybe have, 2 investors you're starting to reach out to. But as you scale that and you start to, qualify and engage with multiple investors, it's going to be really hard to manage that communication without some sort of more of tools and process to manage that. So when we talk about communication with investors, this is both in terms of how you get in front of them, so how you manage that outreach process and that you're logging that all in one place, but also how you keep in touch with them throughout that sales process. So, or that kind of investor process. So if you've had a pitch meeting, being able to remind yourself, oh, I have to send them a pitch deck after this, or I have to send them that financial information. So really managing that in that kind of investor process. And this is the same for both prospective investors, so potential net new investors that you're reaching out to for the first time and bringing through that they're kind of bringing you through that process. You're bringing them through yours, but also for managing communications with existing investors. So say when I was on the investor side, we'd get the cadence could be different depending on the company, but often they'd send quarterly, updates, which included management accounts, and like things like product updates on the business and so on. So it can also help to do those kind of quarterly updates and really manage that in one place as well. So just a note on that. And then I will go into a little bit just to tell you how this could kind of, again, you don't have to use HubSpot, but using some sort of a tool to manage that investor process can really help you remain efficient and kind of save time overall. So in terms of what HubSpot is, just to preface a little bit, so HubSpot is a all-in-one, CRM platform. So rather than using, often see companies maybe they want email marketing, so they buy a tool for that. They want to create a pipeline, so they buy a tool for that. But really HubSpot has all your marketing, sales, and services in one platform. In terms of HubSpot tools, then HubSpot can really help you optimize each stage of the buyer's journey. So normally I talk about this in terms of like the journey that a prospect goes on from being, a stranger, knowing nothing about your product or service, to becoming a prospect, a customer, and then a champion. But really we can flip this buyer's journey and it doesn't have to be a customer, it can be an investor. So in this case, we've got someone being a stranger. This is an investor who knows nothing about you, and then they become a prospective investor, then they become an investor, and then they're champions, and you're updating them on everything that's going on with your business because they've recently invested. So yeah, having different tools to manage all of those different parts of that kind of investor buyer's journey, essentially. So I will just put things into practice a little bit in terms of what this could look like in a tool like HubSpot. But again, you could use a different CRM. So in terms of a couple basic setup tools, and I did include on the Eventbrite, basically we have a fundraising portal. So if you download the free version of HubSpot, there'll be pre-built parts there for you. So like a pre-built fundraising pipeline, a couple of templates for investor outreach, and a few things like that. So you can download that, and that will all be there for you ready to go. If you do go down that route, you can do a couple of setup tool things within HubSpot. So I've just gone into, if you do have that free version there, I've just gone into settings here. You can go into settings and connect your email. So again, you can log all of those emails with the different prospective investors and current investors. So if you just go in there, you just would connect your email. You can also download the email extension so that say if investors are clicking on your pitch deck and engaging with your content. And then equally, if you're booking meetings with investors and you want them to be able to book time with you, you can connect your calendar as well there. So it's like a kind of, a Calendly type thing, but you could also just use Calendly if that's the tech you're using. If maybe you're the founder and you're mainly managing the investment process, but you also want you say you have a co-founder, you can also add them through the users and teams functions. You could go create user and easily add other people in your company there. So I don't want to go into that in too much detail. We do have I have a step-by-step guide I can share on that afterwards, but I really want to focus mainly on that kind of investor process and what that would look like in here. To say if you have my first stage that I was going through there was creating that investor list. To say if you have your list of maybe 50 companies and you have, you've got the domain for them. Maybe for some of them you have, emails and contact details. You could add that as well. To say if you've got that list, maybe you start in like a Google Sheet or Excel. If you turn that into a CSV file, you could go and import that directly into your CRM. So here, if we've got, I've just gone into here, I've gone into contacts, I've gone to contacts and then import. And then you could easily start an import there. Import from computers. So I'll see if I have a dummy file here. In this case, I'm going to just do one file. I'll just do one object, but usually actually multiple objects is good. I just don't know if I have an example. And say if you've got the investor information and their contact details, you could import that here. And I'll see if I just have a sample here. And then that would map, some of that isn't important, but you can map that. So basically, if you've got your investor list, you've got that top 50, you could upload that directly to your CRM and then start, actively going after those investors. Or if you're getting introductions, then all of that would be, logged in your CRM. So say, for example, one of your top prospective investors is, we'll say it's, this is a HubSpot example, but say this is investor A. You'd have all of their information here. This is the person you've been trying to reach out to and maybe having, starting to have meetings with about your company. You'd be able to see all of their information here. So again, it's about logging all those interactions so that so everyone in your company knows you've been in touch with this company, this investor, and maybe if they aren't ready to invest in you like this year, you could have all that information for future interactions. You can see here, you can see any activity you've had with them, any emails you've sent, or maybe that other people in your company have sent. If you made calls to that investor, that would all ultimately be logged here. And then you can email the investor either directly through your CRM, so that way, or to be honest, I'm often in the Gmail tool. So if you were reaching out to investors that way, then that would all be logged here. And then equally, say if this is someone who they're in your investor process and you have just had meetings with them. First of all, you could use the meetings tool to have them book time with you. To say, for example, you're scheduling that pitch meeting. Similar to if you have prospects, you don't want that ping pong back and forth of, oh, are you free Tuesday at 2 or I'm free this time? So you can create scheduling pages specific to pitch meetings. Maybe you do a group scheduling one because you want your 2 co-founders there, and they could easily then book time with you there. So I'll just say if the name is pitch meeting, that's the internal name, but say if pitch meeting startup by, and then you could have their investor name there, and then schedule that on Zoom. And then if you do want to follow up, say with documents after that pitch meeting, you can upload, say if you uploaded your pitch deck here, so say I've just as a sample, I've just uploaded the webinar from today into this document. So I've got Codebase fundraising workshop, and say if you sent them your pitch deck or other documents after the pitch meeting, you'll be able to see if they all these emails are tracked, see how they're tracked and logged. You'll be able to see if they are actually looking at your pitch deck and engaging with your content. Equally, if you do that, you'd get a notification. So you'd be able to call that investor straight away and say, hey, I saw that you have looked at our pitch deck or you haven't looked at our pitch deck. So again, all about reaching out at the right time, treating it as that sales and marketing process. The pipeline I showed you earlier, this is more of a live view of that pipeline. as I said, with the HubSpot kind of fundraising portal, that's all, you can have that and download that pre-built, but you can also customize it based on the investor pipeline you want to have. This is just one that we've got created here. So here, this is the live view of what I showed you earlier. So as I said, you've got that qualify stage, moving investors from qualified to pitch to DD, legal, cash and bank, etc. So if you have, it's just easier to manage it in this if you've got like 5 potential investors and you're moving them throughout that process. You can see that there. As I said, you can, with the HubSpot kind of fundraising portal tool, you can a lot of this, you can have a pipeline pre-built, but if you do want to configure it and kind of customize it based on your business, you can change the stage names there. To say, for example, if you want to add a stage or you want to delete a stage, you can very easily do that here. Just one more thing before we kind of start to wrap up. Oh, sorry, I think the recording stopped for a second, but I think we're back. If you do want to use tools like templates and sequences, as I mentioned before, like maintaining that for that outreach to prospective investors, but also managing communications with current investors. So here's an example, like if you don't want to be like copying and pasting information, if you're always, reaching out with similar information to investors. So here we've got just a sample template that you can, make and reuse. But here, like say if you could have like hi, contact first names, that's a placeholder, but it would pull in the information from their email. This is a very, obviously customize this based on your business. But say it could be, you and I spoke a few years back. Now I'm starting the funding process for a new company. You could do like a 1-line or 2-line kind of overview of your business. These are obviously quite big customers, but say include a few details there. And then you could say, can I send you our pitch deck? And then, yeah, it's just so you're not like, if you're using, like you do want to customize it sometimes depending on the investor or if you've already met them, etc. But just so you're not just saving, it's all about saving time, so you're not like copying and pasting information all the time. And as I said before, you can also use it for things like updating. You can also use something like sequences and templates for updating current investors that you want to like update on your, like in your quarterly reviews, or send them your management accounts and product updates and things like that. You can also use the sequences tool. These are basically, you can create multiple templates within the sequences tool. And then say if you have 3 investors, you can just enroll them every quarter in that. So almost done. As I said, I'll share a bunch of that was quite a lot of information, but I'll share a bunch of resources that you can set that up yourself if you want to. And then just jumping back in for a minute. So if you do want to download that portal replicator tool, we'll include it in it's on the Eventbrite, but we'll also include it in the post-event resources. One other thing I did want to mention, on HubSpot for Startups, we are investing quite a lot in fundraising resources for startups, fundraising events, and also one more thing that we're running as a pilot program is Investor Connect. So just to talk a little bit about this. So as I mentioned, I manage HubSpot for Startups for UK and Ireland. So I work with lots of VCs, accelerators, and incubators across the UK and Ireland. So, would be tapped into those VC networks. But we are a global team. So, we have someone in DACH, someone in France, we've a team in the US as well. So we do really have that global network of VCs. And then equally, we have a lot of HubSpot for Startups customers as well who are looking for funding. So we've started this Investor Connect pilot where basically if you are a HubSpot for Startups customer and reach and meet these criteria, you can be showcased to our network of global VCs. So again, I'll share a bit more resources on that afterwards, but just could be a good opportunity if you are in that kind of, you're ready to raise in the next 3 to 6 months and you have a pitch deck, that could be something that is of interest to connect with our global network of VCs. And these are just a few additional resources on fundraising that we have on hubspot.com/startups. So yeah, lots of information there. I see a few questions, so I'll just start to pop in.
Thanks for this, Anna. This is great.
Yeah, of
I
course.
was thinking of running a quick poll as well as you what you
Oh,
get
nice.
familiar with some questions as well. Thanks to everyone who submitted some questions. You can also add some more if you'd like, whether it's about HubSpot or fundraising in general or anything as well as startups. Just use a Q&A function in just at the bottom of your screen. All right. I think do you want to start taking some question, Anna? If you've got some.
Yeah, I'll just have
Wow.
can you link? Yeah, so you can link. There's one just on here on I was going through the integration of email to HubSpot. So yes, you can use Gmail or you can use Microsoft Outlook as well. So thank you, Graham. Based on your experience, what is the most fatal mistake? Oh, sorry, I'll just read out the full question. So based on your experience, what is the most fatal mistake the startup can make in the pitch deck? So for me, it's actually information overload. What number one is information overload. So based on when I do actually review pitch decks in my current role as well because of our Investor Connect pilot. And I'm sometimes, if I'm judging on panels and stuff, or for awards, but in Enterprise Ireland in particular, like if there was too much information and by the end of the pitch deck, for some of them, I didn't even know what the company did. So I'd say like showing up front, even in like the first slide, like what the company does and keeping that really succinct. So I'd say that's one, especially like the investors are, they're reviewing countless pitch decks every day. So that's important. And then another one, which was when companies were pitching in person, there's just been a few instances where I had seen like really unrealistic forecasts. So like, crazy numbers. So I think there's that kind of balance between being ambitious, but also being realistic in terms of like, it's okay if you can back it up with data, maybe in terms of like the size of the opportunity, or like if there is really good like historical data. But I'd say that's another fatal one, is like if there's really unrealistic forecasting, then that'll kind of, I would say, make the investor actually less inclined to want to move forward. And then there's the question, a follow-up kind of from the same person. So which type of communication is favorable for investors? Direct or indirect? So I'd say the type of channel would really depend on, like, I know like it can really depend on the investor, to be honest. Like I know, I think if you can get a warm introduction, like that's always best, because people get a lot of, like LinkedIn is good, but people get a lot of outreach on LinkedIn. So I'd say warm introduction is best. If you can't do warm, then going through LinkedIn or going through the company website. Like I know a lot of VCs would have like general intake forms and stuff on their company website when we get inbound applications that way.
Just on that as well, since it's a similar topic, with a question in the chat, do you have any good examples of pitch decks that are freely available online, maybe?
Yeah, I can share some of those afterwards. Definitely, I'll just make a note.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Pitch decks. I know there's some good articles I've seen on this.
Brilliant.
I think we have like a HubSpot for startups one as well, like a blog on that, so I'll share that too.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
And then
I think we had a
there's
couple of questions from Rocco as well. One around HubSpot freemium plan and what functionalities are available in the free version. Yeah, if you wanted to go ahead with that.
I might just pop a resource in the chat. So you do, the free version is great. So yeah, we have our free version of basically HubSpot, not to go into all the details, but we have 5 separate hubs. So there's marketing, sales, service, like everything for sales and marketing and services basically. And within that, there's free, starter, pro, and enterprise. So with the free, I've included it there because there's a tab there for free tools. It goes into everything, but you can manage, like you can upload. There's basically just like different usage limits on it. So say like I think you can only create like 1 to 2 pipelines, and like the HubSpot branding would be on specific things. And say on the marketing side, like you wouldn't get the automation with the free tools, but that kind of whatever what I linked kind of goes into everything in detail. And then Roko was also asking in the where to find investors. I mentioned using AI. Is there a specific one for this purpose, or classic GPT is enough? So I actually don't know a specific one that's specific for investors. You can, like, I have used ChatGPT because for us as well, for like researching investors, we also do have our own tool that's currently free called ChatSpot, where you can research companies and investors and then directly add them to your CRM. It is in beta, so like it's not perfect yet, to be honest. I don't know of one that's specific to investors, but there might be one. So if people know of one, then please let Roko know. But I do think like you can still use just a general GPT for that. So there's one. If the MVP is not going to be ready for another month or two, is it reasonable to start pitching your idea to investors? If yes, are there any tips for doing it better? I'd say it depends. It can depend on your product, because for some products might be in stealth mode, or it can really depend on the sector. For me, like I haven't seen on my side, I've always had startups who already have that MVP, because it can really show, like, you have a lot more data and it can make it more tangible. So for me, when I was an investor, I wouldn't have reviewed ones without the MVP. But I think that really can depend on the sector. If it's like, yeah, I think it can really depend on the sector. Thanks for being such an interactive group, everyone.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Anna. We also have time for some more questions as well, so you can keep them coming if you'd like. In the meantime, I know we've shared plenty of links in the chat and the resources that Anna mentioned as well. So we'll be following up with a recording to this webinar and all the links to the resources as well in the post-event email next week. So if you've registered on Eventbrite, you will get this. And yes, actually, I know fundraising investment is a big focus for HubSpot for startups. It is also at Codebase and for our TechScaler program as well across Scotland. So we'll be organizing more events around that. So more opportunities to kind of learn and potentially put it in practice as well. Because everything from kind of pitching events, both online and in person, more kind of workshops around demystifying kind of fundraising investment. Last year we also did something around angel investment, which is usually quite suitable for sort of earlier stage startups. So you can find that link on our YouTube channel as well. Yeah, I think can't see more question. Oh, we've got one more question. Will you recommend attaching a video of a product to the pitch deck or emails?
Yeah, I mean, I think a video is always great. It kind of, it visualizes it. So if you have one that's like a good enough quality, I would say definitely. Yeah.
All right. Give it a last chance for question. If not, I think everyone can have 10 minutes back in the day. I think it was supposed to be all the way until 12, but I think we've had some excellent questions and some great content as well. So thanks again, Anna, for joining and sharing your experience today. Thanks everyone for joining, being great audience with lots of questions. And yeah, we've got a lot more events coming up at Codebase, and TechScaler will be including all of this. I hope all of you have a brilliant day, brilliant rest of your day. Yes, keep us in the loop if you're doing any fundraising as well. We'd love to hear your stories. Thank you very much, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Anaïs.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.